CHATR1. Discipline begins with awareness. You cannot change what you refuse to see. Every moment you spend drifting through life without a plan, without purpose, is a moment lost to excuses and distractions. Recognize your habits, recognize the times you give in to temptation, and acknowledge the patterns that keep you from achieving what you want. This awareness is uncomfortable, because it forces you to face your own failings, but discomfort is the first step toward transformation. Once you see where your weaknesses lie, you can take deliberate action, setting boundaries and creating systems that support the disciplined version of yourself. You must understand that waiting for motivation is a trap. Action must precede feeling. Discipline is forged in the moment you choose to do what you should, even when it's hard, even when it feels unfair to yourself. Every choice matters, and repetition compounds into habit. Awareness is your compass. It shows you where you have been and where you are headed, and from there, every small action builds the life you desire. CHAPTR2. Next, you must embrace responsibility. Discipline cannot exist where blame is cast. Every time you blame circumstances, others, or luck, you surrender your power. True discipline begins with accepting full responsibility for your life. It is the recognition that the outcome of your day, your career, your health, and your relationships rests in your hands and in no one else's. This acceptance is liberating because it removes excuses and demands action. When you stop blaming, you start doing. You set your standards and enforce them rigorously. Responsibility means creating commitments you cannot break, and when you fail, acknowledging it, learning from it, and immediately returning to action. Discipline thrives in those who refuse to outsource their accountability to chance, mood, or circumstance. It is the mindset of a warrior, of someone unwilling to let life happen to them. Instead, they take control and craft the life they want through relentless action and unwavering focus. CHATR3. Discipline is built through small, consistent actions. You do not become disciplined overnight, and no single moment of effort will transform you permanently. It is the accumulation of daily choices, small victories repeated over and over, that forms an unbreakable habit. Waking up on time, completing tasks even when you don't feel like it, following through on promises, resisting distractions. These are the quicks of a disciplined life. Do not underestimate small actions. They may feel insignificant now, but momentum is a powerful force. Each action reinforces the next, and over time, the person who was once undisciplined becomes someone unstoppable. The key is consistency. Action must be non-negotiable, automatic, and habitual. Do not wait to feel ready. Force yourself to start, to do the work, to build the rhythm of progress. The compound effect of consistent effort is where real discipline resides. CHATR4. You must train your mind to prioritize long-term rewards over short-term comfort. Every day, life tempts you with immediate pleasure, scrolling social media, junk food, procrastination, and asks you to exchange future gain for instant gratification. Discipline is choosing the uncomfortable now so that the reward later is far greater. It is a skill to delay pleasure and endure discomfort without complaint. This requires clarity of vision. You must see the prize, feel it, and understand the difference between fleeting desire and meaningful progress. When you make this mental shift, temptation loses its power. Discipline becomes an exercise of foresight, a strategic commitment to the person you are becoming, rather than the momentary urges that seek to derail you. CHATR5. Environment shapes behavior more than willpower ever will. To force yourself to be disciplined, design your surroundings to support the habits you wish to create. Remove distractions, reduce temptations, and surround yourself with cues that encourage productivity. If your phone steals your focus, leave it in another room. If snacks destroy your diet, don't buy them. If laziness overtakes you, place reminders of your goals where you see them constantly. Discipline thrives when the path of least resistance leads toward action, not inaction. Your environment either enables your success or sabotages it, and understanding this truth allows you to make changes that automate your discipline. CHAPTER 6 Time management is the backbone of discipline. Every undisciplined life suffers from a lack of structure. You must plan your day intentionally, prioritizing the tasks that matter most and eliminating the unnecessary. Scheduling does not restrict freedom. It creates it. By defining blocks of time for focus, work, and rest, you remove indecision and reliance on fleeting motivation. When your day is organized, your actions become deliberate, your energy is preserved, and procrastination loses its grip. The disciplined person does not drift. They navigate their time with precision, understanding that every minute spent wisely compounds into extraordinary results. CHAPTER 7 Self-talk is crucial. The internal dialogue you maintain shapes your actions. If you constantly tell yourself, "I can't," "I'm too tired," or "I'll do it later," you program yourself for failure. Discipline demands empowering self-talk. Phrases like, "I will do this," "I can push through," and "I am capable of more than I think." Words have power. They influence emotions, behavior, and ultimately outcomes. Train your mind to reinforce action, resilience, and commitment. The voice inside you can be your greatest ally or your harshest saboteur. Discipline requires you to master this voice, making it a relentless motivator instead of a timid excuse maker. CHAPTER 8 You must embrace discomfort as part of the process. Discipline is rarely comfortable. It asks you to do what you do not feel like doing. Resistance is a signal that you are growing, that you are stepping beyond the familiar and into territory where transformation occurs. When you feel the urge to quit, to delay, or to avoid, recognize it as an opportunity to strengthen your resolve. Force yourself through the discomfort. Over time, the body and mind adapt, and actions that once required enormous effort become routine. Discomfort is not your enemy. It is the forge in which the steel of your will is tempered. CHAPTER 9 Accountability accelerates discipline. Share your goals with someone who will check your progress and hold you responsible. When your commitments are witnessed by others, your desire to follow through intensifies. Accountability is not punishment. It is leverage to ensure consistency. Even the strongest self-discipline benefits from external reinforcement. By combining internal drive with external accountability, you create a powerful system where excuses are minimized, action is maximized, and results are inevitable. CHAPTER 10 Visualization strengthens resolve. Picture yourself completing the task you are avoiding. Imagine the satisfaction of finishing what others abandon, and feel the pride in mastering your impulses. The mind often responds to imagined outcomes as if they were real, preparing your body and emotions to act decisively. Visualization clarifies your goals and creates a mental path to achieve them. When reality becomes difficult, your mind has already rehearsed success, and you can draw upon that rehearsal to power through resistance. CHAPTER 11 Track your progress relentlessly. Discipline is built on measurable results, not vague intentions. Keep a journal, mark your successes, and analyze your failures. When you see progress, even incremental, it fuels motivation. When you recognize setbacks, it provides clarity on what must change. The act of tracking creates awareness and reinforces the habit loop, making discipline tangible rather than abstract. Measurement transforms effort into accountability and turns repetition into mastery. CHAPTER 12 Learn to say no. Discipline is a form of selective focus. Every time you give in to distraction, unnecessary commitments, or indulgence, you dilute your energy. Saying no is not rejection. It is protection of your future self. Prioritize the activities, tasks, and people that align with your goals, and eliminate everything else. Boundaries create space for consistent action and prevent chaos from undermining your progress. Mastering the art of saying no strengthens the framework of discipline and ensures your efforts are directed toward what truly matters. CHAPTER 13 Forgive yourself but return to action immediately. Failure is inevitable. You will miss a day, slip in habit, or falter under pressure. The disciplined person does not dwell on failure. They acknowledge it, learn from it, and resume action without delay. Self-pity and regret are traps that kill momentum. Resilience is an essential component of discipline. Each time you rise after failure, your capacity for consistent action grows stronger, and the habit of discipline becomes more deeply ingrained. Check 14. Reward yourself strategically. Discipline does not mean denying all joy, it means aligning pleasure with progress. Celebrate milestones in ways that reinforce, not sabotage your goals. Small rewards, when used wisely, strengthen habit loops and motivate continued action. Recognize the effort you put in, appreciate the progress you've made, and let that acknowledgement fuel your next step. Discipline is a balance of effort and recognition, structure and motivation, challenge and reward. Use these rewards as fuel, not as a substitute for action. Chapter 15. Finally, embrace the identity of a disciplined person. Do not think of discipline as a series of actions alone, but as a reflection of who you are becoming. Every choice you make, every task you complete despite resistance, every habit you build contributes to the person you embody. Internalize this identity. I am disciplined. I follow through. I honor my commitments. When discipline becomes part of your identity, it no longer requires force. It becomes automatic. Yet to reach this point, you must push yourself daily, choose action over comfort, embrace discomfort, and persist relentlessly. Discipline is not punishment, it is the tool by which you shape your life, the engine of freedom, and the key to unlocking your highest potential. By forcing yourself to act, to persist, and to show up consistently, you craft a life of achievement, purpose, and fulfillment. The power to change is in your hands, and every moment you choose to act builds the bridge to the life you desire. If you want, I can expand each chapter into a full audiobook length version where each chapter reads like a 5 to 8 minute motivational monologue, so you'll have 15 full chapters ready to record as a full audiobook. Do you want me to do that next? You said. A7 chatty of 1 H1 THEMB what eta HHNEMBROFT CHATETOSHI FTLDB me on ATT GPT said. Sheikh FTR1. Discipline begins with awareness, and awareness begins with an honest look at yourself, the habits you maintain, the routines you allow, and the endless excuses you give yourself every day, because until you confront the reality of your current state, change is impossible, and pretending otherwise only prolongs the life of your unfulfilled potential. Consider for a moment how much of your life has been guided not by intentional choices, but by default actions, by reacting to circumstances rather than creating them, and by letting fleeting feelings dictate your decisions rather than sticking to principles that serve your long-term growth. Awareness is not merely noticing what you do, but understanding why you do it, recognizing the triggers that lead to procrastination, distraction, and self-sabotage. It is the moment when you stop lying to yourself and acknowledge that many of the delays, missed opportunities, and frustrations you experience are not the result of bad luck, circumstances, or other people, but rather the consequence of your own repeated decisions, your tendency to choose comfort over effort, ease over progress, and temporary pleasure over enduring fulfillment. This is uncomfortable, yes, because no one likes to face the truth about their shortcomings, but it is essential, for discomfort is the birthplace of growth, and without it, you remain trapped in cycles of inaction and mediocrity. Start by observing your daily patterns, noting where your energy flows and where it leaks away unnoticed, which habits propel you forward and which habits hold you back, and then begin to dissect these behaviors without judgment, simply recording them as data points to understand the mechanisms of your own mind. Awareness requires reflection, and reflection requires honesty, which many avoid because it is easier to blame circumstances, other people, or external events than to accept personal responsibility for the outcomes in their life. Yet, until you embrace the full responsibility of your choices, Discipline will remain elusive, a concept admired in theory, but avoided in practice. Because true discipline cannot coexist with denial or excuses, it thrives in clarity and accountability. Once you have identified the habits and patterns that no longer serve you, you can take deliberate steps to alter them, replacing behaviors that drain your energy with routines that build momentum and reinforce purpose. This is where the concept for quickening motivation becomes crucial, because waiting for motivation to strike is a fool's errand. It is unreliable, unpredictable, and often absent precisely when you need it most, leaving you dependent on fleeting feelings rather than anchored in consistent behavior. Discipline is the bridge between who you are today and who you aspire to be, and it is built not by sporadic effort, but by relentless, repeated action, even when you do not feel like it. It is the habit of honoring your commitments to yourself, the practice of doing what must be done regardless of mood or circumstance, and the refusal to surrender to procrastination, distraction, or fear. Begin with small, manageable steps that challenge you just enough to stretch your comfort zone, but not so much that they overwhelm or paralyze you. Because progress compounds, and each action, no matter how minor it may seem at the moment, contributes to a foundation of lasting discipline. Set specific intentions for your day, your week, and your month, and measure your adherence to them. Because without measurement, awareness becomes meaningless, and without structure, effort becomes inconsistent. Use tools, reminders, and environmental cues to support your discipline, such as alarms to enforce routines, visual prompts to keep goals visible, and accountability partners to track progress, understanding that external reinforcement strengthens internal resolve. Recognize the moments of resistance as signs of growth rather than obstacles, because every time you push past discomfort, hesitation, or the urge to quit, you reinforce neural pathways that make discipline easier in the future. Reflect regularly on your progress, adjusting strategies as necessary, celebrating small victories without allowing them to create complacency, and treating setbacks not as failures, but as feedback that informs your approach. Because the disciplined person is not immune to error, they are resilient in response to it. Embrace the principle that discipline is not punishment, restriction, or deprivation, but the tool through which freedom, autonomy, and achievement are realized. Because when you master self-control, you are no longer at the mercy of impulses, whims, or external pressures, but rather, you dictate your trajectory with intentionality and purpose. Understand that awareness is ongoing, not a single moment of realization, and that cultivating it requires constant vigilance, reflection, and honesty about your actions and their consequences. By committing to awareness, by observing yourself without excuses, and by taking decisive action based on these observations, you lay the groundwork for the disciplined life you desire, creating momentum that carries you from intention to execution, from thought to achievement, and from who you are to who you are capable of becoming. Every step in this process reinforces the next, and the more deeply you engage with awareness, the more natural discipline becomes, until it ceases to be a forced effort and transforms into a fundamental aspect of your identity, shaping your choices, your habits, and ultimately, your destiny. Awareness is not merely the first step in discipline, it is the lens through which all subsequent effort must be filtered, and mastering it will provide the clarity, focus, and insight necessary to navigate challenges, resist distractions, and act decisively in pursuit of a life defined not by circumstance, but by deliberate, purposeful, and sustained effort toward the person you intend to become. Chapter 2 Responsibility is the cornerstone of discipline, and embracing it fully requires a level of honesty and courage that many avoid, because it demands that you stop blaming others, circumstances, or luck for the outcomes of your life, and instead recognize that every success, every failure, and every moment of stagnation is the direct result of the choices you make, both consciously and unconsciously. And until you internalize this truth, you will remain at the mercy of excuses, waiting for external forces to shift before taking action, which is a dangerous illusion because life rewards those who act decisively, not those who hope passively, and discipline cannot thrive where blame is abundant, as every time you redirect responsibility outward, you surrender your power and reinforce a mindset of helplessness rather than control. And understanding this principle transforms the way you approach every decision, every task, and every challenge, because once you accept responsibility, excuses lose their appeal, fear loses its grip, and action becomes inevitable. And this is the difference between people who achieve and those who drift, between those who master themselves and those who allow circumstances to dictate their path. Responsibility is not a burden, it is liberation, because when you accept that your outcomes are in your hands, you also accept that your future is not determined by luck, talent, or connections, but by your commitment to consistent action, your ability to persist through discomfort, and your willingness to make the hard choices that others avoid. And this mindset shift is often uncomfortable at first because it exposes your own limitations and forces you to confront patterns of procrastination, indecision, and avoidance. But discomfort is a necessary ingredient in the process of transformation, for growth occurs outside the comfort zone, and accepting responsibility is the doorway to that growth, compelling you to examine your daily routines, habits, and the way you manage your time, energy, and focus, because every choice has consequences, whether immediate or delayed, visible or subtle. And once you see the ripple effects of your decisions, you begin to understand how much control you truly have and how much control you have been ignoring. And with this understanding comes the ability to redirect your efforts toward constructive, disciplined behavior, rather than continuing patterns that undermine your potential. And discipline is strengthened each time you acknowledge your role in a situation instead of rationalizing it away, because taking ownership fuels accountability, sharpens your focus, and reinforces the principle that you cannot rely on anyone else to enforce the standards you set for yourself. Responsibility also means creating commitments that are non-negotiable, the type of promises to yourself that you honor even when circumstances are inconvenient, your energy is low, or external pressure tempts you to relent, because these commitments are the framework upon which discipline is built. And each time you follow through despite difficulty, you strengthen your self-trust, the most powerful internal resource a person can possess. And when self-trust becomes unshakable, you no longer need motivation to act, because you act out of alignment with your identity and values, not transient feelings. And this is the essence of discipline, acting consistently, purposefully, and reliably regardless of mood, environment, or resistance. And embracing responsibility teaches you to anticipate challenges rather than react to them, to design your actions rather than drift through circumstances, and to measure success not by luck or ease, but by effort, persistence, and adherence to principle. And this mindset transforms obstacles into opportunities, setbacks into lessons, and external pressure into fuel for growth. Because when you accept responsibility, you see each challenge as a test of your ability to rise above excuses, act decisively, and maintain focus on your goals. And responsibility does not eliminate difficulty, discomfort, or resistance, but it changes your relationship with these inevitable aspects of life, allowing you to approach them strategically, with determination and clarity, rather than with avoidance or complaint. And the practice of taking responsibility also extends to your relationships, your career, your health, and every domain of life, because every interaction and decision becomes an opportunity to exercise discipline, to follow through, and to strengthen the internal standard that guides your actions. And over time, this consistency compounds into results that are undeniable, visible, and transformative, because a life built on accountability and responsibility cannot remain stagnant, cannot be derailed by excuses, and cannot be defined by external circumstance. And the more you embrace this mindset, the more empowered you become to make deliberate choices that align with your goals, values, and long-term vision, reinforcing the principle that responsibility is not punishment or harshness, but the engine that drives personal mastery, autonomy, and freedom. And every act of disciplined responsibility builds your capacity to achieve, your resilience to withstand adversity, and your ability to craft the life you desire, because when you fully internalize that your life is the result of your own actions, you take control of your destiny, and the practice of responsibility becomes a daily exercise in strength, clarity, and self-mastery, shaping not only what you do, but who you are becoming. And it is through this unwavering acceptance of responsibility that discipline takes root, grows, and ultimately defines the trajectory of your entire life. Chapter 3. Discipline is built through small, consistent actions, and understanding this truth is essential because so many people look for instant transformation, thinking that a single burst of effort, a sudden surge of motivation, or a dramatic change in circumstances will make them disciplined, when in reality, discipline is forged in the steady, repetitive actions that become ingrained over time, and it is this accumulation of small victories that compounds into lasting habit, creating a foundation upon which larger achievements can be built. And the key to leveraging this principle is to recognize that no action is too small to matter, because each choice you make, each task you complete despite resistance, each commitment you honor, no matter how minor it may seem at the moment, reinforces neural pathways in your brain that strengthen your ability to act consistently in the future. And consistency is the heartbeat of discipline. It is not the occasional heroic effort, but the daily, intentional repetition of the right behaviors that transforms intention into reality. And this requires patience, persistence, and a willingness to engage with discomfort, because small, consistent actions often feel tedious, repetitive, or insignificant. Yet they carry the power to create momentum, and momentum is what turns effort into habit, habit into character, and character into success. And to cultivate this momentum, you must start by defining specific, achievable actions that can be repeated daily, such as waking up at a fixed time, dedicating a set period to focus on important work, exercising, reading, or practicing a skill that aligns with your goals. And by committing to these small actions every day, regardless of mood or circumstance, you train your mind and body to respond automatically to the demands of discipline, making the process increasingly effortless over time. And one of the most powerful aspects of small, consistent actions is that they reduce overwhelm, because when you break your goals into manageable steps, they become less intimidating, less paralyzing, and more actionable, allowing you to take immediate action rather than procrastinate. And each completed step reinforces your confidence, strengthens your self-efficacy, and fuels the motivation to continue, creating a virtuous cycle of progress and self-trust. And it is crucial to understand that setbacks are part of the process, and encountering obstacles or experiencing temporary failure does not negate the power of consistency. Rather, it tests your commitment, challenges your perseverance, and provides valuable feedback that can inform adjustments to your approach. And when you maintain the habit of consistent action, even in the face of resistance, frustration, or temporary discomfort, you are cultivating resilience, one of the most vital components of discipline, because resilience ensures that your momentum is not easily disrupted, that your habits endure through difficulty, and that your long-term goals remain within reach. And this process also highlights the importance of patience, because the results of consistent action are rarely immediate, and the disciplined individual learns to trust the process, to act faithfully day after day, without the need for constant validation or instant gratification, understanding that meaningful progress is measured over weeks, months, and years, not moments or days. And this long-term perspective shifts the focus from fleeting feelings to deliberate choices, from temporary effort to sustained commitment, and from external rewards to intrinsic satisfaction, because true discipline is internalized. It is not motivated by occasional praise or external acknowledgement, but by the knowledge that you are building the life you want, step by step, action by action, habit by habit. And to enhance the effectiveness of small, consistent actions, it is critical to create systems and routines that support your goals, because human willpower is limited. And when your environment, schedule, and daily rituals are aligned with your desired behaviors, discipline becomes easier, more automatic, and less reliant on fluctuating motivation. And systems reduce friction, prevent decision fatigue, and make the right actions the default, allowing consistency to flourish even when energy or focus is low. And another essential factor is reflection and adjustment, because as you commit to daily actions, you must periodically assess what is working, what is not, and how you can refine your approach to improve efficiency, effectiveness, and sustainability. And by combining small, repeated actions with ongoing reflection, you create a dynamic process of continuous improvement that strengthens discipline while fostering growth, skill, and competence. And as these actions compound over time, you begin to notice profound changes not only in your productivity, but also in your mindset, confidence, and ability to persevere, because each act of consistent effort reinforces the identity of a disciplined person, shaping how you see yourself, how you respond to challenges, and how you approach every aspect of life. And eventually, these small actions become automatic, effortless, and creating a feedback loop in which discipline no longer requires force, but instead manifests naturally as a reflection of the person you have trained yourself to be. And understanding this principle, that discipline is the sum of small, consistent actions repeated over time, empowers you to approach your goals strategically, to persist through adversity, and to cultivate habits that ultimately define your character, your success, and your ability to create the life you truly desire. CHTR4 discipline is not just about taking action, it is fundamentally about training your mind to prioritize long-term rewards over short-term comfort. And this is one of the most challenging aspects for anyone striving to master self-control, because human nature constantly tempts us with immediate gratification, fleeting pleasures, and easy escapes that promise comfort, but ultimately sabotage progress. And understanding this principle is essential, because the ability to delay gratification is what separates those who achieve their goals from those who perpetually settle for mediocrity. And it begins with cultivating clarity about what truly matters to you, defining the outcomes that hold significance in your life, and recognizing the difference between the transient satisfaction of indulgence and the enduring fulfillment of disciplined effort. Because too often people mistake short-term pleasure for success, only to realize later that they have squandered time, energy, and potential chasing fleeting impulses that yield no lasting value. And to counteract this, you must intentionally rewire your decision-making processes, training your mind to see discomfort not as something to avoid, but as a signal that you are growing, that you are choosing the path that leads to progress rather than retreating into habits that reinforce stagnation. And this requires conscious awareness of the moments when temptation arises, because each decision presents an opportunity to strengthen discipline, to practice delayed gratification, and to reinforce the neural patterns that will make such choices easier in the future. And the key is to focus on the long-term vision while managing short-term impulses, reminding yourself constantly of the future benefits that your current sacrifices will create. And when you internalize this perspective, it changes the way you respond to challenges, discomfort, and distraction, because actions are guided not by fleeting feelings, but by deliberate choices aligned with your goals. And one practical way to implement this is to create systems and routines that automatically direct your behavior toward long-term benefits, such as structuring your day to prioritize important tasks, limiting exposure to distractions that trigger impulsive decisions, and setting specific milestones that provide feedback on your progress. And these strategies reinforce the habit of choosing long-term gain over immediate pleasure, which is the essence of discipline, because repeated practice in making these choices strengthens self-control, builds confidence in your ability to act despite resistance, and gradually shifts your mindset from seeking comfort in the moment to valuing achievement over instant gratification. And it is also crucial to recognize this is a skill that requires training and patience, because your brain is naturally wired to seek pleasure and avoid pain, and overcoming these instincts requires repeated effort, conscious decision-making, and persistence. And with each choice to delay gratification, you are effectively exercising a mental muscle that grows stronger over time, making future acts of discipline easier and more automatic. And this process also involves self-reflection, because periodically evaluating your actions, identifying where you gave in to short-term impulses, and planning adjustments to improve future behavior ensures that your growth is intentional, measurable, and sustainable. And embracing this approach allows you to see challenges as opportunities rather than obstacles, as moments to practice delayed gratification and reinforce the habits that define disciplined individuals. And it also encourages resilience, because when discomfort arises, whether in the form of fatigue, distraction, or resistance, you learn to endure it, to act in spite of it, and to maintain focus on your long-term vision, understanding that temporary discomfort is a necessary step toward meaningful achievement. And the more you practice this mindset, the more natural it becomes, until choosing long-term benefit over immediate satisfaction is no longer a struggle but a default response, a core aspect of your identity, and a reflection of the disciplined person you are cultivating to achieve your goals. And this mindset extends beyond tasks and goals into every area of life, from financial decisions and career choices to health, relationships, and personal development, because the ability to prioritize enduring value over fleeting pleasure influences not only what you do but also who you become, shaping habits, character, and ultimately the trajectory of your life. And by committing to this principle consistently, by practicing awareness, reflection, and intentional action, you develop a mental framework that allows you to resist temptation, overcome procrastination, and take decisive action in alignment with your long-term vision. And this is the true power of discipline, the capacity to act purposefully, consistently, and effectively even when comfort, ease, or immediate reward beckon. And when this capacity becomes ingrained, it transforms every choice you make, every habit you form, and every goal you pursue into a deliberate act of self-mastery, ensuring that your life is directed by intention, guided by principle, and propelled by the unwavering ability to prioritize what matters most over what is temporarily enticing but ultimately inconsequential. CFTR5 environment is one of the most powerful, yet often overlooked, determinants of discipline, and understanding its influence is crucial, because your surroundings have a profound effect on your thoughts, behaviors, and ultimately the habits you form. And to force yourself to be disciplined, you must recognize that willpower alone is insufficient for sustained success, because every day presents countless opportunities to succumb to distraction, comfort, and temptation. And if your environment is filled with triggers that encourage inaction or indulgence, even the strongest intentions can be derailed. And this is why the disciplined person takes control not only of their actions, but also of the physical, social, and digital spaces they inhabit, consciously designing an environment that supports the behaviors they wish to cultivate, because small adjustments to your surroundings can significantly reduce friction, eliminate unnecessary decisions, and make disciplined actions easier to execute consistently. And it begins with identifying the cues in your environment that prompt undesirable behaviors, whether it is a cluttered workspace that invites procrastination, a phone that constantly interrupts focus, unhealthy food that tempts your willpower, or people whose habits undermine your goals. And once these triggers are identified, the next step is to remove, limit, or reconfigure them in a way that reduces their impact, because out of sight and out of reach, temptations lose much of their power. And the more you shape your environment to align with your objectives, the more automatic and effortless disciplined behavior becomes. And this concept extends beyond removing distractions. It is equally important to introduce positive cues that encourage the actions you want to take, such as placing visual reminders of your goals, creating dedicated spaces for work, exercise, or study, surrounding yourself with tools, resources, and materials that facilitate progress, and even cultivating relationships with individuals who model the habits and behaviors you aspire to, because social influence is a potent force, and being around motivated, disciplined people naturally elevates your own standards, reinforces accountability, and creates an atmosphere in which consistent effort is normalized, expected, and encouraged. And these environmental adjustments do more than support discipline in the moment. They train your mind to respond automatically to cues, creating a pattern of behavior that eventually requires less conscious effort, making the disciplined path the default. And this is critical because reliance on willpower alone is exhausting, limited, and unsustainable over time, while a supportive environment acts as a constant silent reinforcement, guiding your actions and decisions subtly yet powerfully. And understanding this allows you to take deliberate control of factors that were previously influencing your behavior unconsciously, giving you the ability to design a life in which success is structurally facilitated rather than constantly fought for. And the disciplined individual understands that discipline is less about motivation and more about removing resistance, creating momentum, and making the right choices the easiest, most obvious, and most natural options in any given situation. And this extends to digital spaces as well, where notifications, social media, and endless entertainment options compete for attention and deplete focus. So creating boundaries, scheduling use, and curating digital environments to minimize distraction is just as critical as organizing your physical spaces. And by systematically adjusting your environment, you also reduce decision fatigue, because the fewer unnecessary choices you face, the more energy and focus you can dedicate to meaningful, goal-aligned actions. And this approach allows you to conserve mental and emotional resources for the tasks that truly matter, ensuring that consistency, efficiency, and productivity are maintained. And it is important to understand that shaping your environment is an ongoing process, because as your goals evolve, new challenges and temptations arise, and a disciplined person continually evaluates, tweaks, and optimizes their surroundings to maintain alignment with their objectives. And this is not about creating rigidity or obsession with control, but rather about intentionally constructing conditions that support growth, reinforce habits, and facilitate success. Because the easier it is to do what is right, the more likely you are to follow through, and the harder it is to do what is wrong, the less often you will be tempted to deviate from your path. And over time, these environmental adjustments compound with consistent action to produce momentum, habit, and mastery, making discipline less a matter of force and more a natural byproduct of your carefully curated surroundings. And the more conscious you become of how your environment shapes behavior, the more empowered you are to remove friction, increase alignment, and create conditions in which disciplined action is effortless, automatic, and inevitable. And when combined with awareness, responsibility, and consistent practice, the influence of a supportive environment can exponentially accelerate progress, reinforce long-term habits, and sustain momentum through periods of resistance. distraction and fatigue, and ultimately, mastering your environment is not just about removing obstacles or temptations, but about constructing a world around you in which the disciplined, focused, and high-achieving version of yourself can flourish, thrive, and accomplish extraordinary results consistently, reliably, and without constant struggle against internal or external interference. CFTER 6 time management is the backbone of discipline, and mastering it requires understanding that every moment of your life carries potential, and yet, without intentional planning and prioritization, this potential is often squandered on trivial tasks, distractions, and reactive behaviors that leave you feeling busy but unaccomplished. And the disciplined person recognizes that time is the most finite and valuable resource available, and once a moment passes, it cannot be recovered, making it imperative to allocate your hours deliberately toward activities that align with your long-term goals, values, and vision. And this begins with clarity, because without knowing what truly matters to you, you will find yourself pulled in multiple directions, responding to urgencies that may not be important, and filling your day with low-impact tasks that provide the illusion of progress, but ultimately leave you stagnant. And once you define your priorities, you can create a structured schedule that organizes your day into purposeful blocks of time for focused work, deliberate practice, self-improvement, health, and rest, understanding that structure is not a limitation but a liberation, because when time is intentionally allocated, indecision and procrastination diminish, and the path to meaningful achievement becomes clearer. And effective time management also requires recognizing the difference between urgent and important tasks, because the urgent often demands immediate attention but does not contribute to long-term goals, whereas the important drives progress, growth, and the realization of your ambitions. And the disciplined person learns to act strategically, addressing the important first, managing or delegating the urgent when possible, and refusing to be enslaved by distractions or minor crises that steal energy and focus. And this approach is further strengthened by creating routines and habits that automate decision-making, because each decision consumes mental energy, and by structuring consistent behaviors, you reduce decision fatigue, conserve willpower, and make disciplined action the default rather than a constant struggle. And accountability is also a key component of time management, because when you set clear commitments, deadlines, and milestones, whether to yourself or others, you create external pressure that reinforces internal discipline, ensuring that you follow through and maintain momentum. And it is equally important to build in time for reflection, assessment, and adjustment, because even the most carefully planned schedule requires evaluation to ensure that it continues to align with your goals. And when you consistently review how your time is spent, you can identify inefficiencies, eliminate low-value activities, and optimize your workflow, further increasing productivity and reinforcing disciplined behavior. And prioritization also demands the courage to say no, to decline requests, distractions, and activities that do not serve your purpose, because every yes carries a cost in time and focus. And by protecting your schedule, you protect the most valuable asset you have, your ability to act intentionally, consistently, and effectively. And the disciplined individual understands that efficiency alone is not sufficient. It must be combined with effectiveness, meaning that your time is not only used productively, but in alignment with the outcomes that matter most. And this requires constant vigilance, awareness, and willingness to make difficult choices about what deserves your attention and what must be deferred or eliminated. And even with careful planning, unexpected challenges, interruptions, and obstacles will arise. And the disciplined person prepares for this by building flexibility into their schedule, allowing for adaptation without losing sight of priorities, because rigidity without foresight leads to frustration and derailment, whereas a well-structured plan that anticipates variability creates resilience and stability. And understanding the compounding effect of time is also essential, because small increments of disciplined effort, when applied consistently over days, weeks, and months, produce extraordinary results. And mastering the management of each day ensures that these small actions accumulate into monumental achievements. And time management is not just about work or productivity. It encompasses every aspect of life, including health, relationships, learning, rest, and recreation. Because a disciplined life balances output with recovery, action with reflection, and responsibility with joy. And when you respect and manage your time effectively, you not only achieve your goals faster, but also cultivate a sense of control, autonomy, and confidence that reinforces your identity as a disciplined person. And this identity then feeds back into your behavior, making it easier to maintain structure, resist distraction, and act in alignment with your priorities, even under pressure. And ultimately, time management is the framework that allows discipline to flourish, because without it, even the most motivated, committed, and capable individual will find themselves scattered, reactive, and unfulfilled. And by mastering how you allocate, prioritize, and protect your time, you create the conditions in which consistent action, meaningful progress, and extraordinary achievement are inevitable. And every minute you invest intentionally compounds into a life defined not by wasted potential, but by purposeful, disciplined, and deliberate success. And this is why the disciplined person treats time as sacred, plans with intention, acts with focus, and relentlessly aligns every hour with the vision of the life they aspire to create. CHAPTR 7 Self-talk is one of the most powerful tools for building discipline, and yet it is often overlooked, underestimated, or misunderstood, because the internal dialogue you maintain shapes not only your thoughts but also your emotions, actions, and ultimately your results. And if your self-talk is negative, doubtful, or defeatist, it will sabotage even the best laid plans, making discipline a constant uphill battle. Whereas positive, empowering, and intentional self-talk strengthens resolve, reinforces action, and creates a mindset in which follow-through becomes natural, consistent, and automatic. And the first step in mastering self-talk is awareness, because many people are completely unaware of the narratives they replay in their minds every day, of the judgments, excuses, and limiting beliefs that whisper, "I can't," "I'm too tired," "It's too hard," or "I'll do it later." And by bringing these thoughts into conscious awareness, you create the opportunity to challenge them, reframe them, and replace them with messages that align with the person you want to become. Because discipline is not about occasional heroic effort, but about the cumulative effect of small, consistent, and intentional choices, and the mind must be conditioned to support those choices rather than undermine them. And this requires practice, because changing the habitual patterns of thought is like training a muscle. It will resist, complain, and attempt to revert to the old, familiar ways, but with repeated effort, the new neural pathways strengthen, making empowering self-talk the default rather than the exception. And one practical approach is to create a set of affirmations or mantras that reinforce your commitment to action, persistence, and follow through, such as, "I do what I commit to," "I act despite discomfort," or "I am capable of more than I realize." And repeating these phrases intentionally, especially at the start of your day or before challenging tasks, programs your mind to anticipate action and to expect compliance with your own standards. And another effective strategy is to reframe challenges and resistance as opportunities rather than obstacles, by telling yourself, "This is my chance to grow," "I am strengthening my willpower right now," or "Every moment I resist is a victory." And this reframing transforms the perception of difficulty from a reason to quit into a signal that you are on the right path. Because the presence of resistance is evidence that you are pushing beyond comfort, stretching boundaries, and building the habits that define disciplined individuals. And self Talk also functions as a mechanism for accountability, because the internal conversation you maintain serves as a constant check on your intentions, reminding you of your commitments, your goals, and your standards, and when aligned properly, this inner dialogue motivates you to act even when external pressures, fatigue, or distraction tempt you to falter. And it is important to recognize that self-talk is not simply about repeating positive phrases mindlessly, but about cultivating belief, clarity, and focus, because the mind responds to the messages it receives. And if you repeatedly affirm your capability, your commitment, and your persistence, your behavior will align accordingly, creating consistency in action that is the hallmark of discipline. And the disciplined individual uses self-talk strategically to prepare for challenges, maintain focus, reinforce habits, and sustain momentum. Because without internal support, even the most structured routines, external systems, and environmental adjustments will falter when motivation wanes, energy dips, or resistance rises. And by consciously shaping your internal dialogue, you create an internal environment that mirrors the external structures you have built, reinforcing effort, strengthening resolve, and ensuring alignment between thought and action. And this process also requires self-compassion, because setbacks, mistakes, and lapses are inevitable, and the voice inside must guide you back into action without harsh judgment, guilt, or self-pity, while still maintaining accountability and commitment, because the goal of self-talk is not to flatter or excuse yourself, but to cultivate resilience, focus, and persistence. And when mastered, self-talk becomes a continuous source of reinforcement, coaching, and motivation, a constant reminder of your priorities, your standards, and your capacity to follow through. And over time, this internal dialogue shapes identity, because the person you consistently tell yourself you are becomes the person you behave like. And by reinforcing the identity of a disciplined, capable, and persistent individual through self-talk, you embed discipline not just in behavior but in the very way you think, perceive, and respond to challenges. And ultimately, this internal framework ensures that every choice, every action, and every habit is guided by intention, purpose, and a relentless commitment to follow through, making discipline not a fleeting effort, but a defining characteristic, a natural extension of the way you think, speak to yourself, and navigate the world. And mastering self-talk is therefore not optional for anyone seeking lasting discipline. It is the silent force that drives behavior, shapes identity, and transforms ordinary effort into consistent, unstoppable progress toward every goal you set for yourself. Discomfort is an inevitable companion on the path to discipline, and embracing it is one of the most critical steps for anyone who wishes to forge lasting self-control and mastery, because discipline is rarely comfortable, convenient, or easy, and the very nature of growth demands that you act in ways that stretch your limits, challenge your routines, and confront the habits of comfort and avoidance that have been cultivated over a lifetime. And yet most people instinctively flee from discomfort, seeking the ease, pleasure, and familiarity that provide temporary relief, but ultimately stall progress and prevent the development of self-mastery. And to truly force yourself to be disciplined, you must reframe your perception of discomfort, recognizing that it is not an enemy, a sign of failure, or an indication that you should quit, but rather a signal that you are stepping into territory where meaningful growth occurs, where resilience is built, and where the habits of the disciplined mind and body are forged. And this begins with awareness, noticing when discomfort arises in the form of resistance, fatigue, frustration, distraction, or even fear, and understanding that these signals are markers of the exact moments when discipline must be exercised, because every instance you act, despite discomfort, strengthens your ability to act the next time, creating momentum, reinforcing habit, and training your mind and body to respond with focus, effort, and persistence, rather than avoidance, procrastination, or compromise. And the disciplined individual learns to approach these moments strategically by breaking tasks into manageable steps, setting clear intentions, and maintaining a mindset that frames effort and struggle as the cost of progress, not as punishment. And one of the keys to embracing discomfort is developing the ability to endure delayed gratification, to accept temporary pain or effort in exchange for long-term gain, understanding that the immediate ease of quitting, avoiding, or compromising provides no lasting reward, whereas pushing through builds confidence, skill, and achievement. And this process also involves self-talk, because the internal dialogue you maintain during moments of resistance can either sabotage or reinforce discipline. And by reminding yourself of your purpose, your goals, and the future benefits of your effort, you create a mental framework that turns discomfort into a cue for action, rather than a reason to retreat. And it is important to recognize that discomfort comes in many forms: physical, emotional, mental, and even social, and each type challenges different aspects of your willpower, focus, and perseverance. Yet all are opportunities to grow, because the act of facing and enduring discomfort strengthens your capacity to act consistently under any circumstance, and repeated exposure to discomfort creates tolerance, resilience, and an unshakable belief in your ability to handle challenges, setbacks, and resistance, which in turn makes discipline easier, more automatic, and more reliable over time. And embracing discomfort also means accepting that failure, mistakes, and imperfection are natural parts of the process, because every time you act despite uncertainty, difficulty, or discomfort, you are exercising courage, refining strategy, and learning the principles that underlie mastery. And this mindset transforms resistance from an obstacle into a tool, a measure of growth, and a daily reminder that progress is being made, even when it does not feel effortless. And the discipline in the dishul uses as a signal to step up, to push harder, to maintain focus, and to persist, rather than as a justification for quitting or compromising standards. And by continuously practicing this approach, discomfort becomes familiar, manageable, and even welcome, because it signals that you are moving in the direction of growth, rather than stagnation. And the more you embrace discomfort, the less it controls you, the more resilient you become, and the more reliable your discipline is, because you are no longer dependent on comfort, convenience, or external circumstances to dictate your behavior, and instead, you act according to principle, purpose, and long-term vision, regardless of how easy or difficult it feels in the moment. And ultimately, embracing discomfort is not simply about enduring pain or pushing through challenges. It is about transforming your relationship with difficulty, resistance, and effort, so that each instance of struggle becomes an opportunity to strengthen your habits, expand your limits, and cultivate the consistent, unshakable discipline that defines high achievers. And over time, the practice of willingly engaging with discomfort builds an inner fortitude that permeates every area of life, shaping decisions, habits, priorities, and identity, because the person who can act despite discomfort consistently is the person who can achieve extraordinary results, maintain momentum under pressure, and sustain the level of effort necessary to create a life of purpose, success, and self-mastery. And this is why discipline and discomfort are inseparable, because one cannot exist without the other. And the more consciously you embrace and act through discomfort, the more automatic and effortless disciplined behavior becomes, embedding resilience, perseverance, and unwavering commitment into the very fabric of your character and daily life. CHER9 accountability is one of the most powerful accelerators of discipline, and yet it is often neglected because many people prefer the illusion of independence over the reality of responsibility, failing to recognize that true self-mastery is not built in isolation, but is reinforced by structures, relationships, and mechanisms that demand follow-through. Because when someone, or something, holds you accountable, you are far more likely to act consistently, follow through on commitments, and maintain focus even when motivation falters, and this principle applies across every area of life, from personal goals and health routines to career objectives, skill development, and financial management, because accountability creates pressure that amplifies effort, reinforces standards, and reduces the likelihood of vacillalizing or procrastinating. And to harness this force effectively, you must first define clear expectations for yourself, establishing specific, measurable, and time-bound commitments that are meaningful and aligned with your long-term goals, because vague intentions invite failure and inaction, whereas clearly articulated commitments provide a roadmap for behavior, a standard against which progress can be measured, and a structure upon which discipline can thrive. And once these commitments are in place, you can create a leverage both internal and external mechanisms, because self-accountability alone is often insufficient in moments of resistance, fatigue, or distraction, and external accountability, through mentors, coaches, peers, partners, or even public declarations, provides reinforcement, motivation, and oversight that increases the likelihood of consistent action. And the most effective accountability systems involve regular check-ins, progress tracking, and honest evaluation, because when you are forced to report on performance, analyze results, and justify deviations, you are compelled to act intentionally, take ownership of your choices, and reinforce the habits that build discipline. And it is equally important to combine accountability with transparency and honesty, because self-deception undermines the process, excuses weaken effort, and discipline requires clear-eyed acknowledgement of both successes and failures. And when accountability is paired with constructive feedback, reflection, and adjustment, it transforms setbacks into opportunities, lapses into lessons, and mistakes into growth, because the disciplined individual does not view accountability as punishment, but as a tool for refinement, improvement, and progress. And it also encourages consistency, because the knowledge that someone or some system is monitoring, evaluating, and expecting follow-through naturally strengthens resolve, reduces procrastination, and creates a feedback loop in which repeated effort becomes habit. And this feedback loop is further reinforced when accountability is aligned with intrinsic motivation, meaning that while external structures help enforce discipline, they are integrated with your own values, goals, and personal standards, so that the desire to follow through becomes both internal and external, creating a powerful combination that sustains action under any circumstances. And accountability also teaches resilience, because it exposes you to the consequences of your actions, requires you to confront discomfort, and demands that you respond strategically rather than avoid responsibility. And through this process, your capacity to maintain discipline, even under pressure, is strengthened, your self-trust deepened, and your commitment to your long-term vision solidified. And it is important to note that accountability does not always have to be imposed by others. You can create internal accountability systems, such as habit tracking, journaling, self-assessment, deadlines, and personal metrics, which serve as consistent reminders of your commitments, provide tangible evidence of progress or lack thereof, and reinforce the behaviors that cultivate discipline. And the disciplined person learns to treat these tools seriously, honoring the standards they set for themselves as if they were accountable to a trusted external party, because this approach eliminates the gap between intention and action, between knowing what must be done and actually doing it. And over time, accountability becomes internalized, meaning that even in the absence of external oversight, the habitual practice of reporting, evaluating, and reflecting on behavior strengthens self-regulation, self-motivation, and consistent execution. And ultimately, accountability is not about punishment, control, or surveillance. It is about creating an environment in which disciplined action is more likely to occur, mistakes are corrected quickly, and progress is continuously reinforced. And when you integrate accountability into every aspect of your life, Through relationships, systems, personal tracking, and transparent reporting, you cultivate a framework in which discipline thrives, actions are aligned with goals, and long-term success becomes inevitable, because accountability transforms good intentions into consistent execution, ensures follow-through even under resistance, and builds the internal and external support necessary to maintain discipline in every circumstance. And this makes accountability not optional, but essential for anyone who seeks to force themselves to be disciplined. Because without it, even the strongest motivation, awareness, or planning can be undermined by distraction, resistance, or lack of follow-through, whereas with accountability, effort is amplified, focus is sharpened, and the disciplined path becomes the natural, automatic, and consistent route to achievement and personal mastery. Chapter 10 Focus is the foundation of discipline, and mastering it requires understanding that attention is the currency of achievement, because the quality and consistency of your focus determine the magnitude of your results. And yet in a world full of distractions, constant notifications, and endless options for diversion, maintaining focus has become one of the greatest challenges to self-mastery, and the disciplined individual recognizes that every moment spent drifting, multitasking, or reacting to irrelevant stimuli is a moment of potential lost, a moment in which energy, clarity, and opportunity are squandered. And to force yourself to be disciplined, you must learn to control your attention, direct it intentionally, and protect it rigorously, because without focused effort, even the best strategies, intentions, and systems fail to produce meaningful outcomes. And this begins with awareness, noticing when your attention is being pulled away, when your mind wanders, and when distractions erode your capacity for deep work, because recognizing the problem is the first step toward solving it. And once you understand the sources of distraction, whether internal, like wandering thoughts, doubts, or anxiety, or external, like notifications, interruptions, or environmental noise, you can take deliberate steps to minimize or eliminate them, and creating an environment conducive to focus is essential, including organizing your workspace, turning off unnecessary alerts, establishing clear boundaries with others, and structuring dedicated blocks of uninterrupted time for high-priority work. Because focus is not accidental, it is intentionally cultivated, and without a structured approach, the mind defaults to distraction, reactive behavior, and fragmented attention. And another critical element of focus is clarity of purpose, because the mind will naturally attend to what it perceives as valuable, and when your goals, priorities, and intentions are clearly defined, attention is automatically guided toward actions that matter, and every decision, every movement, and every effort is filtered through the lens of relevance, efficiency, and alignment with long-term objectives, and this reduces wasted effort, enhances consistency, and strengthens the habit of disciplined action. And the disciplined person also practices mental discipline by training the mind to resist the temptation of novelty, instant gratification, and unproductive thought patterns, because attention is a muscle that must be exercised, reinforced, and conditioned through deliberate practice. And by setting specific tasks, deadlines, and milestones, you provide focus with direction, structure, and accountability, creating a framework in which deep engagement, sustained effort, and meaningful progress are possible. And it is equally important to embrace the principle of single tasking, because multitasking fragments attention, reduces efficiency, and undermines the quality of work, whereas concentrating on one task at a time allows full cognitive resources to be applied, making execution more effective, decision-making sharper, and results more impactful. And the disciplined individual also cultivates resilience against internal distractions, such as self-doubt, fatigue, or negative self-talk, by using strategies like mindfulness, mental reframing, and self-affirmation, which keep the mind anchored on the present task, maintain confidence in capability, and prevent attention from wandering to unproductive concerns or imagined obstacles. And sustained focus is further enhanced by managing energy, because attention is closely linked to physical, emotional, and mental vitality, and habits such as proper sleep, nutrition, movement, and scheduled breaks ensure that the mind is primed for prolonged engagement. And by pairing high-energy periods with tasks that demand deep concentration, you maximize the efficiency, quality, and consistency of effort. And focus is also reinforced through reflection, because periodically reviewing what was accomplished, evaluating the effectiveness of attention, and identifying moments of distraction allows for continuous improvement, enabling you to refine systems, routines, and strategies to protect and enhance focus. And over time, repeated practice of concentrated, intentional effort builds a neural architecture in which attention, persistence, and discipline become habitual, almost automatic, so that acting in alignment with priorities is natural rather than forced. And the discipline in the principles to turn focus into a superpower, allowing them to execute at a higher level, maintain momentum under pressure, resist distractions, and achieve results that would be impossible without sustained attention. And understanding the compound effect of focus is essential, because even small increments of concentrated effort, when applied consistently over days, weeks, and months, accumulate into extraordinary progress, skill, and mastery. And this reinforces the importance of protecting attention relentlessly, aligning actions with purpose, and developing the mental habits that ensure discipline is consistently applied. Because the ability to focus is not just a tool for productivity, it is the mechanism through which discipline manifests, goals are achieved, and the life you desire is intentionally created. And when focus is cultivated alongside awareness, responsibility, consistency, and accountability, it transforms every action into a deliberate step toward mastery, every choice into a reinforcement of standards, and every challenge into an opportunity to exercise unwavering concentration, making discipline not a struggle, but a natural extension of the way you think, act, and navigate the world. And ultimately, focus is the lens through which all other aspects of discipline converge, ensuring that intention, effort, and action are aligned to produce remarkable, sustainable results. Chapter 11 Habits are the architecture of discipline, and understanding their power is essential, because discipline is not a singular act of will, but the consistent expression of behavior that has been reinforced over time. And habits are the mechanism by which this consistency is maintained, because once a habit is established, action becomes almost automatic, reducing reliance on motivation, decision-making, or fleeting self-control. And this is critical because human willpower is limited, and even the most determined individual can falter when relying solely on conscious effort, whereas habits create a framework in which discipline operates naturally, almost effortlessly. And to force yourself to be disciplined, you must understand how habits are formed, maintained, and strengthened. And you must intentionally cultivate those that align with your goals, while eliminating or reshaping those that undermine your potential. And the first step in building powerful habits is awareness, because you cannot change what you do not observe. And by tracking your behaviors and recognizing patterns and identifying triggers, you gain insight into the routines that govern your life, both constructive and destructive. And this insight allows you to intervene strategically, replacing unproductive habits with behaviors that reinforce your long-term vision. And the process of habit formation is rooted in repetition, consistency, and reinforcement, because the brain strengthens neural pathways each time an action is repeated, and over time, these pathways make the behavior automatic, effortless, and resilient against fatigue, distraction, or resistance. And the disciplined individual leverages this by starting small, focusing on manageable behaviors that can be consistently executed, because attempting to overhaul everything at once overwhelms willpower and creates friction and increases the likelihood of failure, whereas incremental, achievable habits build confidence, momentum, and a foundation upon which more complex and ambitious routines can be layered. And it is equally important to attach habits to specific cues, triggers, or routines, because context creates automaticity, and when an action is linked to a particular time, environment, or preceding behavior, it becomes easier to execute without conscious deliberation. And reinforcement is also critical, because behaviors that are rewarded through intrinsic satisfaction, progress tracking, or tangible outcomes are more likely to be repeated, strengthening the habit loop and embedding discipline into your daily life. And the disciplined individual understands that setbacks, lapses, and failures are inevitable in the process of habit formation, but rather than viewing these as evidence of incapacity or weakness, they are treated as learning opportunities, feedback, and moments to refine strategy, because persistence in the face of imperfection strengthens resilience, reinforces commitment, and ensures long-term success. And to maintain and enhance habits, it is also important to design your environment to support them, because external cues, accessibility, and removal of friction significantly influence the likelihood of consistent execution. And by arranging physical, social, and digital spaces to encourage desired behaviors and discourage counterproductive ones, you create conditions in which habits flourish, effort is minimized, and discipline is reinforced. And over time, these carefully cultivated habits shape identity, because repeated actions define who you become, and the disciplined person internalizes the identity of someone who follows through, acts consistently, and honors commitments. And this identity then further reinforces behavior, creating a feedback loop in which habits, discipline, and self-concept are aligned, making disciplined action increasingly automatic, natural, and sustainable. And the power of habits also lies in their compounding effect, because small, consistent actions, repeated daily, accumulate into substantial results, skill development, and personal transformation over weeks, months, and years. And recognizing this compounding effect motivates consistency, patience, and long-term thinking. And it also highlights the importance of focusing on systems rather than outcomes, because habits are the mechanisms through which results are generated, and by optimizing your routines and behaviors, you ensure that achievement becomes inevitable, predictable, and within your control. And ultimately, mastering habits is about deliberate practice, consistency, awareness, and strategic design, because when behaviors are embedded into daily life, discipline no longer relies on occasional effort or fluctuating motivation, but instead becomes an intrinsic part of who you are, governing actions, decisions, and responses automatically, reliably, and in alignment with your long-term goals. And when you combine awareness, environment, triggers, reinforcement, identity, and persistence, habits become the bedrock of discipline, ensuring that every day, every choice, and every action contributes to growth, achievement, and the creation of the life you desire. Because in the end, discipline is the sum of your habits, and the more intentional, consistent, and aligned those habits are, the more unstoppable, resilient, and effective you become in every area of life. Chapter 12. Motivation is often misunderstood as the driving force behind discipline, but true discipline transcends fleeting feelings of inspiration and instead relies on structured systems, consistent habits, and the ability to act regardless of mood or circumstance. And understanding this distinction is crucial, because motivation is temporary, fluctuating with emotions, energy levels, and external circumstances, whereas discipline is an incessant application of effort aligned with long-term goals, independent of immediate desire. And to force yourself to be disciplined, you must learn to act even when motivation is absent, knowing that action itself often generates renewed energy, momentum, and focus. And this begins with recognizing the triggers and patterns that influence motivation, understanding that waiting for the right moment or the perfect mood is a trap that leads to procrastination, inconsistency, and unmet potential, Because high achievers do not rely solely on feelings to dictate their actions, they rely on structure, strategy, and the deliberate choice to act, even in the absence of inspiration. And one of the most effective ways to navigate periods of low motivation is to break tasks into small, manageable steps, because the human mind is more willing to engage with action when the first step is clear, simple, and achievable, and completing these steps generates a sense of accomplishment, which fuels further action, builds momentum, and reinforces the neural pathways associated with disciplined behavior, creating a self-sustaining cycle of effort, progress, and motivation. And the disciplined individual also understands the importance of creating an environment that supports action independent of motivation, including structured routines, pre-planned tasks, accountability mechanisms, and the removal of distractions. Because when the environment is aligned with goals, behavior becomes automatic, predictable, and less reliant on fluctuating feelings, and this ensures that discipline is maintained consistently, regardless of external circumstances or internal resistance. And another critical element is mindset, because discipline is rooted in the belief that long-term outcomes are more valuable than immediate comfort. And by internalizing this perspective, you learn to act with purpose, persistence, and patience, even when motivation is low, because the cost of inaction, delay, or compromise becomes more significant than the discomfort of effort, and reframing challenges as opportunities for growth, mastery, and progress further strengthens resilience and commitment, because motivation is amplified when actions are connected to meaningful outcomes, clear purpose, and personal values, creating intrinsic drivers that persist beyond temporary emotional states. And the disciplined person also leverages external motivators strategically, such as accountability, public commitment, rewards, or social support, not as a crutch but as a reinforcement for action, because these mechanisms help bridge the gap when internal motivation wanes, ensuring consistency, follow-through, and progress. And it is equally important to recognize that motivation is cyclical, and expecting it to be constant is unrealistic, because the disciplined individual anticipates fluctuations, prepares for them, and relies on systems such as to maintain momentum, regardless of how inspired or energized they feel at any given moment. And by committing to action independent of mood, you cultivate the ability to perform under pressure, resist distraction, and achieve results that are not contingent on fleeting feelings. And this practice also strengthens character, self-trust, and confidence, because each instance of acting without motivation reinforces the belief that you are capable of following through, maintaining standards, and achieving goals even when circumstances are challenging or energy is low. And over time, this builds a reliable internal framework in which motivation is no longer the primary determinant of action, because the systems, habits, and mindset you have cultivated ensure that disciplined behavior is the default, predictable, and automatic response. And understanding the interplay between motivation and discipline allows you to harness energy when it is present while remaining effective, consistent, and goal-focused when it is absent. And this dual approach transforms your capacity to execute, persevere, and achieve, because you no longer wait for external inspiration, but instead generate results through deliberate action, structured effort, and unwavering commitment. And ultimately, mastery of motivation within the context of discipline is about recognizing its limits, leveraging its benefits, and ensuring that regardless of internal or external fluctuations, you continue to act, progress, and advance toward the life goals and results you are determined to create. And by integrating awareness, planning, habit, environment, mindset, and accountability, you create a system in which discipline operates independently of temporary motivation, ensuring that every day, every action, and every choice contributes consistently to growth, achievement, and long-term success. CATER 13 persistence is the defining quality that separates those who achieve lasting success from those who falter under pressure, and understanding its role in discipline is essential because consistent effort over time compounds into extraordinary results, whereas sporadic bursts of activity, no matter how intense, rarely produce meaningful progress. And to force yourself to be disciplined, you must cultivate the ability to continue acting toward your goals despite obstacles, setbacks, fatigue, or temporary loss of motivation, because the path to mastery, achievement, and personal transformation is never linear and is invariably filled with challenges that test resolve, patience, and commitment, and this begins with mindset, because the persistent individual views difficulty not as a reason to quit, but as a signal that they are moving beyond their comfort zone, growing and strengthening the skills, habits, and resilience that underpin long-term success. And persistence requires reframing failures, mistakes, and delays as feedback rather than defeat, understanding that every obstacle encountered is an opportunity to learn, adapt, and refine strategies, because the disciplined person knows that the process of progress is iterative and that temporary setbacks do not define the final outcome. And cultivating persistence also involves embracing discomfort, challenge, and resistance as integral components of growth, because the act of persevering despite difficulty strengthens willpower, reinforces habits, and conditions the mind to respond to adversity with action rather than avoidance. And practical strategies for building persistence include breaking goals into smaller, achievable steps, creating routines that encourage consistent effort, tracking progress to maintain momentum, and implementing accountability mechanisms to ensure follow-through, because these structures reduce the mental burden of continuous effort, provide clear markers of progress, and make disciplined behavior more sustainable over time. And the persistent individual also develops patience, recognizing that meaningful achievement often requires sustained effort over months, years, or even decades, and by focusing on long-term objectives while celebrating incremental progress, they maintain motivation, resilience, and commitment, even when results are not immediately visible. And it is equally important to cultivate emotional resilience, because setbacks, criticism, and unexpected challenges can provoke frustration, doubt, or discouragement, and the ability to manage these emotional responses, maintain clarity, and continue acting decisively is a hallmark of disciplined persistence. And this emotional resilience is reinforced through practices such as reflection, mindfulness, visualization, and self-talk, which help maintain focus on goals, strengthen confidence in capability, and provide the mental fortitude necessary to sustain effort under pressure. And the disciplined person understands that persistence is not blind stubbornness, but a strategic, informed, and adaptive approach to effort, in which direction, intensity, and methods are continuously evaluated, refined, and optimized, while the commitment to progress remains unwavering. And persistence is further strengthened by maintaining a strong sense of purpose, because when goals are deeply meaningful, the drive to continue acting despite difficulty is amplified, energy is more easily mobilized, and the individual is less likely to be derailed by temporary discomfort, distraction, or doubt. And the compounding effect of persistent effort cannot be overstated, because repeated action, maintained consistently over time, leads to mastery, credibility, momentum, and opportunities that are otherwise unattainable, and each moment of sustained effort reinforces neural pathways, habits, and identity, creating a self-reinforcing cycle in which acting with discipline becomes automatic, natural, and resilient. And persistence also interacts synergistically with other aspects of discipline, including focus, environment, accountability, habit, and self-talk, because each component supports the capacity to continue acting when effort is required, when energy is low, or when motivation is absent. And the combination of these elements ensures that discipline is not reliant on transient conditions, but is embedded in the structure of behavior, mindset, and daily routine. And over time, the persistent individual becomes increasingly resistant to external pressure, internal resistance, and circumstantial challenges because their identity, habits, and systems are aligned with consistent action, making follow, through inevitable and disciplined behavior, the default mode of operation. And ultimately, persistence is the engine that drives long-term achievement, the mechanism through which effort is sustained, and the bridge between intention and results, because it ensures that action continues in the face of adversity, challenges, and setbacks, reinforcing habits, building momentum, and compounding small victories into significant, lasting success. And by integrating persistence with awareness, focus, habit, environment, accountability, and purpose, you create a disciplined life in which every step, every choice, and every action contributes reliably to growth, mastery, and the realization of your most important goals, making persistence not just a tool, but the very embodiment of enduring discipline, resilience, and unshakable commitment. Chapter 14. Resilience is the cornerstone of sustained discipline, and understanding its role is essential because the journey toward self-mastery, achievement, and personal growth is fraught with challenges, setbacks, and unexpected obstacles, and without the ability to recover, adapt, and persist, even the most motivated and well-intentioned individuals can falter. And to force yourself to be disciplined, you must cultivate resilience as a fundamental characteristic, because it allows you to continue acting despite adversity, maintain focus under pressure, and respond to difficulties with strategic, deliberate action rather than frustration, avoidance, or defeat. And this begins with mindset, because resilient individuals view challenges as opportunities for growth, learning, and refinement, understanding that every setback is temporary, every failure is informative, and every obstacle is a chance to strengthen their capacity for consistent, purposeful action. And resilience is built through repeated exposure to difficulty, discomfort, and resistance, because each instance of enduring and overcoming adversity reinforces confidence, skill, and belief in your own capability, creating a mental and emotional foundation that supports discipline even when circumstances are unfavorable. And cultivating resilience also requires emotional intelligence, because the ability to recognize, understand, and regulate your emotions in the face of stress, disappointment, or frustration determines how effectively you can respond to challenges. And by practicing awareness, self-regulation, and reflection, you develop the capacity to remain calm, focused, and strategic under pressure, preventing temporary emotional states from undermining long-term goals. And practical strategies to strengthen resilience include developing problem-solving skills, anticipating obstacles, setting realistic expectations, and creating contingency plans, because preparation transforms uncertainty from a source of fear into a platform for action. And resilient individuals also cultivate strong support systems, recognizing that accountability, mentorship, collaboration, and constructive feedback provide guidance, encouragement, and perspective when challenges arise, ensuring that setbacks do not lead to discouragement, inaction, or loss of direction. And resilience is closely linked to adaptability, because disciplined individuals must respond effectively to changing circumstances, shifting priorities, and unexpected disruptions, adjusting strategies and tactics while maintaining alignment with long-term goals. And this flexibility prevents rigid adherence to plans from becoming a liability, while reinforcing the ability to act decisively in dynamic, unpredictable situations. And the disciplined person also integrates resilience with self-talk, because the internal dialogue maintained during adversity shapes perception, confidence, and subsequent action. And by replacing negative, defeatist, or anxious thoughts with empowering, purpose-driven statements, you reinforce persistence, focus, and commitment, even when external conditions are challenging. And resilience is further enhanced by maintaining perspective, understanding that temporary setbacks, failures, or difficulties do not define the entirety of your journey. And by keeping long-term vision and priorities in mind, you prevent short-term challenges from derailing progress, motivation, or confidence. And developing resilience also involves physical and mental conditioning, because energy, health, and cognitive capacity influence the ability to respond to stress, overcome fatigue, and sustain effort under pressure. And by optimizing sleep, nutrition, exercise, and recovery practices, you create a foundation that allows disciplined action to persist even in the face of physical or mental strain. And the practice of resilience reinforces identity, because each act of recovery, adaptation, and persistence shapes self-concept, embedding the belief that you are capable, resourceful, and unwavering in pursuit of your goals. And this identity then strengthens discipline, creating a self-reinforcing loop in which resilience and consistent action are mutually supportive, and over time, the accumulation of resilient responses to challenges compounds, producing momentum, confidence, and mastery that make discipline increasingly automatic, reliable, and sustainable. And understanding the compounding nature of resilience highlights why small, consistent efforts to recover, adapt, and persist have profound long-term effects, because each instance of overcoming adversity strengthens habits, mental frameworks, and belief systems that facilitate future disciplined action. And resilient individuals also embrace the principle of learning from setbacks, because reflection, analysis, and adaptation ensure that mistakes are transformed into opportunities for growth, strategies are refined, and future responses are more effective. And this continuous cycle of challenge, response, and improvement creates a durable, adaptable, and high-functioning approach to discipline, ensuring that external circumstances, internal resistance, or unexpected difficulties do not derail progress. And ultimately, resilience is not merely the capacity to endure adversity, but the ability to leverage it, grow from it, and use it to reinforce consistent, intentional, and high-quality action. And when integrated with focus, habits, accountability, self-talk, persistence, and purpose, resilience ensures that discipline is sustained under any condition, making every challenge an opportunity, every setback a lesson, and every obstacle a stepping stone toward mastery, achievement, and the realization of your most important goals. And by cultivating resilience as a core component of your approach to life, you embed the capacity to recover, adapt, and persevere into your very identity, creating a foundation upon which all other elements of discipline can operate effectively, reliably, and consistently, ensuring that no adversity, distraction, or difficulty can permanently derail the path toward the life you are determined to create. Chapter 15. Consistency is the ultimate measure of discipline, and mastering it requires understanding that disciplined action is not defined by occasional effort, bursts of motivation, or sporadic commitment, but by the unwavering repetition of behaviors aligned with long-term goals, values, and principles. And to force yourself to be disciplined, you must embrace the concept that consistency is non-negotiable, because the most successful individuals are not those who try hard once or twice, but those who persist relentlessly, day after day, through challenges, distractions, fatigue, and resistance. And achieving this level of consistency begins with clarity of purpose, because when you understand why you are doing what you are doing, the reason behind your actions fuels perseverance, focus, and commitment, even when external conditions are difficult or internal motivation wanes. And this clarity transforms tasks from mundane chores into deliberate acts that serve your long-term vision, creating intrinsic drive that supports disciplined behavior. And consistency is further reinforced through habits, because repeated behaviors, once embedded, become automatic, reducing reliance on willpower and making action predictable, reliable, and sustainable. And the disciplined individual carefully designs habits that align with priorities, breaking down large objectives into manageable steps, creating routines that anchor behavior, and using triggers, cues, and environmental design to make execution inevitable. Because when actions are systematized, consistency becomes a byproduct of structure, rather than a constant struggle of motivation or decision-making. And another critical factor in sustaining consistency is accountability, because whether through mentors, peers, tracking systems, or public commitments, external reinforcement strengthens follow-through, maintains standards, and prevents lapses from becoming patterns. And the disciplined person leverages this accountability to maintain focus, measure progress, and course correct when necessary, ensuring that every day contributes meaningfully to growth and achievement. And persistence and resilience are essential companions to consistency, because challenges, setbacks, and unexpected obstacles are unavoidable, and the ability to recover, adapt, and continue acting in alignment with priorities underpins long-term disciplined behavior. And by combining resilience with consistent effort, individuals create a self-reinforcing cycle in which momentum is maintained, confidence is strengthened, and discipline becomes increasingly natural and automatic. And maintaining consistency also requires managing energy and attention, because repeated action is only sustainable when the body and mind are adequately supported through proper rest, nutrition, exercise, and focus management. And by aligning high-energy periods with high-priority tasks, optimizing attention, and minimizing distractions, disciplined individuals ensure that consistent effort is both possible and efficient, producing high-quality outcomes while preserving capacity for sustained engagement. And self-talk plays a crucial role in supporting consistency, because the internal dialogue maintained during moments of resistance, fatigue, or boredom shapes action, perception, and persistence. And by cultivating empowering, purpose-driven self-talk, the disciplined person reinforces commitment, reduces self-doubt, and maintains alignment with long-term objectives, turning consistency into a habitual response rather than a sporadic effort. And the power of small, repeated actions cannot be overstated, because incremental progress, maintained consistently over time, compounds into significant achievement, mastery, and transformation. And by focusing on the daily, deliberate execution of meaningful behaviors, disciplined individuals create momentum that accelerates results and reinforces the identity of a person who follows through regardless of circumstance. And this identity is further strengthened through reflection, because regular assessment of progress, acknowledgement of successes, and analysis of setbacks ensures that efforts remain aligned, strategies are refined, and habits continue to support consistent, high-quality action, creating a continuous feedback loop that perpetuates disciplined behavior. And the disciplined individual also recognizes the importance of patience, because consistency requires enduring the mundane, resisting the urge for immediate gratification, and trusting the process, understanding that the cumulative effect of repeated, deliberate action is far greater than the temporary satisfaction of short-term impulses. And by embracing this perspective, they maintain focus, effort, and motivation over the long term, regardless of immediate results. And the integration of all elements: habit, accountability, focus, self-talk, resilience, energy management, and purpose, ensures that consistency is embedded in daily life, making disciplined behavior the default rather than an exception. And over time, this consistency transforms identity, capabilities, and outcomes, because repeated action defines who you are, reinforces competence, and builds momentum that is increasingly difficult to disrupt. And ultimately, mastering consistency is the culmination of all principles of discipline, because it converts intention into action, effort into results, and potential into achievement, ensuring that every choice, every behavior, and every moment of effort compounds into the life, goals, and success you are committed to creating. And by committing to consistency as a core value, you embed reliability, perseverance, and mastery into the very fabric of your daily existence, making discipline not temporary, optional, or dependent on fleeting motivation, but inevitable, sustainable, and unshakable. And through this relentless application of consistent, purposeful action, You realize the full potential of your abilities, achieve extraordinary results, and cultivate a life defined by mastery, purpose, and intentional success. Because consistency transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary accomplishment, and disciplined action into enduring identity.